because we are hanging out somewhere. Okay, so again, good morning, and it is really nice to have you today as a speaker for Angular Bolivia Meetup. And the community is ready to hear you, and actually we are pretty excited to have you here on live by the first time for the community. Please go ahead when you feel ready to start.
Awesome. So much for having I'm really I'm sorry I could not give this presentation in Spanish. My Spanish is not quite good enough yet. Maybe next year. Lo siento. So I'm going to share my screen here. Oops. Can you see yourself?
Yes.
I'm going to assume everything's good. Can I see a thumbs up if it's working?
Yes, I can see your screen. Yeah.
Perfect. Oops. All right. So I wanted to take a little bit of an opportunity to talk a little bit about what's new in Angular. So we're actually at a very perfect timing for this meetup. This is the first meetup I'm speaking at since we released Angular version 6. And so you're getting the freshest possible content about V6. So hopefully everyone's as excited about this as I am. Just a little bit about my background first. So my name is Fluin. I lead developer relations for the Angular team. And there's really kind of two things that are the biggest parts of my job. The first is to help developers and organizations be successful with Angular. And second is to represent the real world of software development into the team so that we make the right sort of product decisions as we're continuing to build out the platform. So on a day-to-day basis, I speak at a lot of conferences. I'm speaking at I/O next week, and then I'm going to Vienna and then Boston and kind of all over the place. But I also lead a lot of our partnership and enterprise relationships. So trying to become better friends with the ecosystem, find new cool connections with other teams, those sorts of things. So we're here today to talk about what's new in Angular. And there's too many things for us to cover in such a short period of time. So I'm going to try not to go over time, but I might go a little bit fast. Feel free to jump in and tell me if I'm going too fast or if we're missing anything. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end for some Q&A. But I'm going to cover this in 3 sections. First, I want to talk about some of the momentum of Angular, because I really think it's important to understand where the community is headed. Then I'll get in and talk about the nitty-gritty details of 6.0, the launch we just did on Thursday. And then we'll shift over a little bit into the future of Angular and where we're headed. So we're going to start off talking about momentum. And I always like to begin talking a little bit about the Angular team values. And so we've spent a bunch of time thinking about this and reflecting on kind of who we are and what we're trying to be. And we decided that we have 3 core values. So the first is apps that users love to use. So really building a great user experience, making sure that Angular applications that are being consumed by users have good performance, have good usability, good accessibility, all these sorts of things. And so that users are at the end of the day happy, because in general, that's why we're building software, is to make users happy, to help them be successful. But we also care about the developer experience and making it easy for developers to love building applications. And so you've seen with a lot of the things that we've done, we really want to make sure that we have a great developer experience. We're automating parts of the workflow, and we're giving a cohesive vision. And last but not least, we really care about a community where everyone feels welcome. If you look all the way back to our entire history since 2009 with AngularJS and now Angular, we've only been successful because we have an awesome community, an awesome, really rich ecosystem of people that are not only building applications with Angular, but they're also contributing back. Things like libraries, things like training, things like consulting. And all these things are necessary to make any sort of software tool successful. And so if we look at the community growth, as of last year, we were at around 800,000 or 900,000. And then when we got to December, we passed 1 million Angular developers, which we're very excited about. And if we flash forward to this year, we've actually now hit 1.25 million 30-day actives on Angular I/O. And so we're really excited about the amount of growth we're seeing, the number of developers. There's more Angular developers every day than there was the day before. And we feel like this growth curve is actually going to continue. And when I reflect on the 1.25 number, these are actually kind of in some ways a lower bound, because from our anecdotal conversations, around 90% of Angular applications are being built behind the firewall. That means they're being built kind of privately at a company where not everyone, these aren't public applications on the public internet, right? This is the 300 applications giant companies use to run their day-to-day operations, to manage inventory, to help employees grow and get training, all those sorts of things. And so we can't actually see most of the people that are using Angular on the public web. And so we use our docs traffic as a stand-in. We're really excited that our community has a ton of meetups. So if you look at angular.meetup.com, you're going to see over 790 meetups across the world. And so communities like Angular Bolivia are a key part of helping developers across the world be successful. So one of the reasons that a lot of developers, a lot of modern web developers really like Angular is that we provide an integrative set of tools. So everything from automation via our CLI into common problems with router HTTP forms, helping you make better applications with animations and internationalization, going into how do we make a more maintainable application with things like testing, language services, and then how can we make our application go further with things like universal and adding accessibility via things like our CDK. And so I'm not going to go through all of these, but I do want to touch on just a couple of these, because I think they're very important to reflect on the way that we have both an opinionated approach, where we have this giant suite of tools where we're making sure that they're all tested together and that we have a kind of a default answer for any problem that you might be facing. But we're trying to do it in a way that is not taking away your freedom and your flexibility. And I think, for example, the material project is a really great example of this, where if you like the material design aesthetic from Google, we have a set of components that you can use to take advantage of that. But if you don't like the material design aesthetic, you can still use a lot of the best practices from the Angular material team via our CDK or component dev kit, where we expose things like overlays, bidirectional input, and a lot of our accessibility tooling to make it easy for you to build these component libraries that are very shared. And one thing that we're trying to let people know is that everyone is building a component library. You are not alone. And so this is something that we're spending a lot of time making this easier. All right, so now I want to dive into some of the coolest parts about version 6. Now, obviously, I'm not going to have time to get into every patch and every commit that went into version 6. So I'm just going to cover some of the highlights. Happy to answer any questions people have in the Q&A. And we're also going to try and do some live coding here at the end. So let's start off with one of the biggest updates from my opinion, which is all really focused on stability and innovation. And so with Angular, there's an expectation from a lot of our developers that they can build Angular applications in the way that they're building them, and that their skills are going to be valid, valuable going into the future. And this is something that is really important to us, that every Angular developer feels empowered to stay up to date with the platform. But at the same time, we want developers to be able to take advantage of the innovation that's going on across the ecosystem. If you look at kind of both web browsers and JavaScript, these things are evolving very, very quickly. Things like WebAssembly, things like web workers landing in all of the browsers, or excuse me, service workers landing in all of the browsers. These are really cool changes. And so we really strive for a good balance between you keep building Angular applications, and we're going to keep making the platform better, and we're going to keep taking your code further. So this is some of the genesis behind both our focus on making it easy to adopt the latest version, as well as making sure that we have consistent, frequent releases so that everyone can stay and not get left behind. So one of the tools that we've built to kind of help and empower developers to do this is a CLI command called Ng Update. And so you call Ng Update with a package, and then what's going to happen is we're not only going to manage the package manager installation of the dependencies that you need for that package, but we can also do code transforms to your project. So an example of this would be if you run Ng Update at Angular/core, we're not only going to update the add Angular/core package, we're going to update all of the framework packages. We're going to update the version of Zone.js. We're going to update the version of TypeScript so that all of these things stay in sync in a way that package managers can't do, just because of how peer dependencies work and how, in general, NPM is not fantastic at flattening things. So we basically look at your peer dependencies and try and make sure that everything is consistent and as up to date as possible, not only updating your packages, but also updating your code. So we think Ng update is really, really exciting. Another CLI command that we've added is called Ng Add. And so this is the idea that we want to be able to very easily add new capabilities into an existing Angular application. And so if I started with a new app with ng new my app, and then I cd into that folder, I could run a bunch of different commands depending on where I wanted to take my application. So you can think of this as a little bit like ng generate, but instead of just creating a single file, this is actually going to be updating my entire application with these new capabilities. So for example, if I ng add at Angular/PWA, I'm going to get an application manifest. I'm going to get a service worker configuration, all those necessary pieces to get up and running with a PWA for offline, all kind of pre-configured for me with some sensible defaults. But you can also do this with things like Material or Ng Bootstrap or Clarity's UX, where any third party can create their own Ng Add schematics to make it easy to adopt. And so we really do see this exploding kind of in the future with more and more people adding these sorts of capabilities. And then when there's kind of new cool projects like Angular Elements, we can also make it easier to adopt some of these. And I want to dig into a little bit about under the hood, how we're doing some of these things. So under the hood, we use a system called Schematics. So Schematics, you can think of it a little bit like a task runner or a set of kind of open arbitrary code that is going to modify your project. And so if you ng new, what we do is we take an empty tree, so basically an empty file system, and we return a new file system that has your application module, your source, your project, your tests, all these sorts of things. So ng new is actually using Schematics under the hood. If you use ng generate to create a component, for example, we'll not only create out the component files that you need, but we can also update, for example, references from your module. And one more example of schematics, because these are arbitrary code, you could actually write a schematic that queries a backend database, figures out the structure and the shape of an API, and creates a local service for that backend. And so we feel like schematics are a really powerful platform for modifying projects. And so we've built schematics into both our ng update commands and our ng add commands, with the idea being that combining the power of schematics with the kind of open platform that is NPM, we are empowering the world to be building with these things. And so, for example, an ng update schematic starts just in your package JSON. You'll create a new key called ng update, and then you'll point it at a collection.json file, which is a collection of schematics. And so here we're looking at an example of, here's the RxJS migration. And so when you run ng update to anything that's going to update RxJS, this will actually run and install an additional dependency into your project called RxJS compat as a peer dependency, because that's the best way to get clean, flat bundles that where you don't have any sort of version mismatches. One of the keys you'll see here is version. And so you can actually create a long series of these things so that if a user is going between maybe version 1 and 2, 2 to 3, whatever sort of change they are, you can target different versions where you might need to apply different migrations for the developer. We also see that it's pretty easy to add a ng add schematic. So in that collection, if instead of ng update as the key, I just call it ng add, then I can give it a description. I can give it a file that I'm going to be running. I can give it an extra name. And so what happens is when I run ng add in my terminal, the Angular CLI is going to query the NPM registries using your local package manager. We're going to download and install whatever package you have listed. And then we're going to run the schematic, the ng add schematic that's identified in that package. And so it's very powerful. I mean, theoretically, you could create an ng add that really does anything to your Angular application. One of the cool, exciting ones that we're working on for the future is the idea that I could ng add native script. And for example, take my existing application, and then get out a web-based application that also is capable of building for native script. And so this is actually one of the most exciting things, and we'd love to see people building with these things, and we'd love to hear people's feedback on Ng Add. Another of the really exciting things that a lot of developers have been asking for is a project that we introduced called Angular Elements, which is basically take the Angular components that you have in your application today and package them as custom elements. And in V1 here, we're in the first versions landed in Angular Elements. This works in an Angular context. And so if you look at the angular.io website, one of the things that we do is we have a lot of code examples. And we had this kind of fundamental problem where we wanted those code examples to live in content and not in code. And so we wanted those code examples to be just kind of part of the static HTML, but we wanted them to be enriched by Angular, where you could have a copy button, you could maybe reformat it, adding features on top of that static content. And the way that we had to do that in version 5 was custom bootstrapping code, where every time we loaded content into the browser window, we were we were scanning across all the content, finding anything that looked like a component, and then dynamically bootstrapping it manually at runtime. But now we've actually switched over to Angular Elements on Angular.io. So if you see a code example, that is an Angular component, but it's being packaged and bootstrapped by the browser as a custom element, so that we don't have to mix this concept of what's in the Angular layer, what's part of my application in the relying on Angular for bootstrapping, and what's just static content being rendered by the browser. And so this is a really nice first step. And this is something that we see expanding in the future, so that we can do things like take an Angular component that you've built and make that distributable so that other developers can consume that maybe in other applications or even other languages. So imagine you have a React application that you want to consume a component that was built in Angular. That's something we want to enable. Another highly asked for feature is called Ng Generate Library. So to do this, we actually partnered with an open source contributor who'd done an amazing job with a package called Ng Packager, David Herges. And so what we did is we worked with him to integrate some of his work into our CLI. And so now you can run Ng Generate Library, and you will get out a pre-configured library project that has both a custom build setup. It has all of the right configuration that allows you to quickly iterate on a library, as well as all of the things that you need to actually build and ship that to others. So this is something that is now kind of core part of the platform that developers have been doing for a long time on their own, and we're just trying to kind of make it easier over time. And so I thought, with your permission, I'm actually going to jump to a demo to show off a lot of the kind of V6 capabilities. So I'm going to switch back to my screen here. Should we jump into a demo? Yes. All right.
Please, yeah.
All right, so we've got kind of 6 tasks that we're going to try and do here. So I'm going to start all the way with a V5 app that I know a lot of us have still. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the update to version 6. Then I'm going to add some capabilities using Ng Add. Then I'm going to dive into some of the cool things with Material in terms of starter components that show off some of the work they've been doing. And then I'm going to add a library to my project, and I'm going to build that library. So let's go ahead. So before we got here, I went ahead and created a CLI project. So I was using the CLI 1.7. I typed ng new v6 demo, and we had this project. And so if I cd into v6 demo and I run ng serve, we should see a Angular version 5 app running CLI 1.7. That's just the basic default page. So welcome to app. That seems to be working just fine. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually update our CLI to version 6. So I'm going to npm install at Angular /CLI at latest. You don't need at latest. It's typically implied. I just end up adding it because I switch between next and latest a lot. So it's helpful to me to be very specific. And so now we've installed the package, and we've got this helpful message that says, hey, the CLI configuration format has changed. We need to run this command. So let's go ahead and run this command. So we're running this ng update command. That's the new command we shipped. And we're passing it at Angular /CLI. So not only is it updating our NPM packages, it also did a bunch of code transforms to our application to migrate from old configuration files to new configuration files. And so the biggest change you're going to see here is that angular-cli.json has now become angular.json. And if we look at the source code here, make sure this is big enough for everyone, and we look at our angular.json file, you're going to see that this file looks pretty different, but it has all the same things from your Angular CLI. So we've got projects here. So this is like, here's our V6 demo project. We should see a V6 end-to-end. And then you've got targets. So build, serve, those sorts of things. And then each target can have a configuration. So production, development, staging, all those sorts of things. So the idea behind this change is that the Angular.json format now is much more flexible, much more powerful in terms of having multiple projects in the same workspace, as well as allowing you to be more explicit with how and where and when you want to be building things in different ways. All right, so now we have an Angular CLI V6 project, but we're still running Angular version 5. So you'll see we're still on 5.2.10 of all of the Angular packages. So now I should be able to just run ng update at angular/core. And I'm going to throw a -- force just to avoid any peer dependency warnings. So under the hood, what this is doing is this is updating not just Angular core, but it's also updating all of the packages kind of that are in this group, all the packages that should be kept together, such as animations, language services, compiler, all these ones that you used to have to type, they're all going to update together now. We also, because Angular requires RxJS 6, we've updated to RxJS 6. And if we check out ng version, we should also see we're going to need to just do yarn, npm install TypeScript at 2. Actually, let me just do an npm install, see what happens. So if we look at our package.json, we should see all the same things here. And then TypeScript should actually be at 2.7. So I'm going to just npm install TypeScript at 2.7. All right, so once that's done, we should be able to ng serve. And now we've got an Angular CLI 6 and an Angular 6 application. Really easy, really fast transition. Everything should be installed, ready to go. So we'll, as soon as this npm install finishes, I will give this an ng serve, and we will take a look at the browser to see if it's worked. And so I think RxJS is actually a really interesting example of how to look at the both ng add and ng update schematics, because you'll see, if you look in RxJS package, you'll see the reference to the ng update schematic. You'll see it's actually only like 30 lines. And all it does is it goes and installs the RxJS-compat package. And so there's been a bunch of changes in RxJS 6 that kind of enable more tree shakeable applications, so you can have smaller RxJS bundles. And we're going to automatically install the compat package, which allows all of your existing code to keep working. And then you can kind of slowly migrate, remove all of the older ways of using RxJS. And we even have a TS-lint rule that will help you do that. All right, so we've installed TypeScript. Ooh, we installed the wrong version of everything here. All right, what have I done here? Let's go ahead and just step back. Sorry about this. I must have done something wrong here. So let's just do ng new v6 Bolivia. We'll just let that install. And while this is going, I'm going to actually go ahead and I want to show you that RxJS version. So if we pull up, has everyone ever used unpackage? It's a really cool way if you want to just look at some of the files in a npm package without having to download and install it. And so if we look in the package.json, we can follow kind of this story here. So we're going to see ng update, which is going to have a migrations link, which is going to point us at migration/collection. And then if we go into the migrations folder, we're going to see that this points at a factory, which is the RxJS v6 migration schematic. And here it is. So we're going to go ahead and run a install for RxJS compat, where we add this to the package dependencies. We write that to the tree, and then we tell npm to go.
Sorry, Stephen, can you zoom in a little bit, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. All right. Is that better?
Yes, it is better. Thank you.
I never noticed this, but apparently we put love into our code here.
Great.
All right, let's give this one more try here. So npm install, actually I'm gonna switch to Yarn because I find it to be a little bit faster. All right, so we're going to update our CLI to v6, and then we're going to run our ng update command, and then we're going to ng update Angular core, which should have us fully on v6, hopefully without the hassles this time. So ng update at angular/CLI. We're rewriting the configuration, should be good there. We'll just run ng version quick to make sure that everything is all good. All right, Angular v5, CLI v6, good. And then we're going to ng update at angular/core. We'll see if we get that same pure dep warning with TypeScript. Nope, should be better this time. Sorry about that. I think I messed something up in my setup where I always play with dangerous new bleeding edge master versions of everything, and that causes problems with demos sometimes. All right, if we check ng version, we should be 6.6. Great, and we should be able to ng serve. And if we look back at our v6 demo app, waiting for localhost, all successfully, and we now have a v6 app. You can check it, ng version v6. We have updated successfully. Hooray! All right. Now,
aplauso, por favor, por
and just recently updated about 13 applications to v6. It was very hard 2 months ago, but today I could probably have done all of the updates in one day to 6 different applications. But now we're going to go ahead and we're going to add some capabilities. So I'm going to run ng add at angular/pwa, and we'll just take a quick look at what that does, and then we'll move on to adding material. Oh, -- project equals v6 Bolivia. The reason you have to specify the project is because, as I mentioned, our new CLI config supports multiple projects, and so it needs to know which one we're adding it to. So created a NGSW config, we added manifest, we added all these app icons. So kind of now out of the box, I have everything I need to ship a PWA. We can do the same thing with ng add at angular/material, -- project equals v6 Bolivia. And so this has updated my package JSON with the dependency. It's updated my Angular JSON with all of the styles I need. It's updated my app module, my index.html. All these things have now been kind of added to my project by default. And one of the coolest parts about this is if we restart code here in the right folder, we're going to see that in our angular.json file, we have this schematic section. And so this actually registers different schematics. And so because we've added at angular/material, I can now do ng generate at angular/material :material -dashboard. -- name equals my dashboard. So what we've done now is we've gotten a starter dashboard component that's been added to our project. So if we look source app, just like ng generating a component, but now we've gotten a fully configured material design dashboard. And so let's just create a couple more of these. So I'm going to create material nav, and we'll create a material table and call this my table. Helps when you type table fully. All right, so we have 3 new components here: my dashboard, my nav, my table. Now let's actually give each of these a try. So I'm going to just delete everything here and say my dashboard. If we take a look here, we need to ng serve. Otherwise, you're not going to see all these great changes. Let's close this, make this, it's probably big enough. Oops. Oh, I didn't run npm install after. So actually, if we look at our ng version, you're going to see CDK error. So I just need to run yarn real quick. All of these things should automatically be in my package JSON at angular/CDK. Yeah, so it's in our package JSON. I just didn't run the install. Oops. Should be good now. No more error. We'll ng serve. It should spin up relatively quickly. And now when we hit refresh, waiting for localhost, Here we go. So out of the box with the My Dashboard, you get a fully configured dashboard with material designs. You've got cards. This is stackable. You've got options. It shows you how to do actions. You've got card headers. Everything is responsive. So it should, if you change the screen window, it should respond. So we're really excited just in terms of helping developers use these cool things that we're building. We'll do another example here. So we'll do My Nav, extra greater than. And here we go. Now we have a side nav. You've got links. And then again, all this is responsive and animated out of the box, right? I didn't have to go set up material. Everything just kind of worked. And we'll just take a quick look at one of the newer ones, My Table. And here we have a fully designed table. It's got a paginator, it's got next, forward, you've got rows, you've got headers, you've got sorting. So super powerful. And the nice thing is we've given you all of the code, right? So you can see what a data source looks like. How do I pull in data? How do I bind this to third-party data sets? What options can I have over the table, the data source, the paginator, all those sorts of things. And then you can see all of the HTML we're using in terms of containers, headers, cells, really just trying to help developers use all these great things because we have very good documentation, but if we can set them up for you in a best practice manner, we feel like it'll make you even faster. All right, so those are the kind of 3 Angular material starter components. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a library. So I'm going to say ng generate my shared lib. I'm going to call it a library. And so we're going to use that project structure that the CLI now enables in the workspaces. So we're going to create a projects folder, and we're going to create my shared lib. And so if we look into my app / my shared lib, projects / my shared lib, you're going to see we've got tests. We've got the ng package.json. So this is what you're going to distribute to the world. You've got a package JSON. You've got all of the kind of, here's my app module. You can export what you want. You can see that they've got a default component. They've got tests, all the things that you want when getting started with a library. But not only that, you can do ng build -project equals my shared lib, and you will get out a dist folder that is your shared lib that's ready for distribution. And so I can see in my little dist folder here. So if we go into dist my shared lib, you're going to see this is, I could just run npm publish right now, put this package on the internet, and it would be ready for others to consume. And it's following all of the best practices in terms of shipping kind of various versions. So ES 2015 with modules, flattened ESM5, all the different versions that kind of any consumer of your library might need for either development mode, for production mode, all these sorts of things. They're all packaged, they're all referenced correctly from the package JSON. And this is using ng packager under the hood. So very excited about this. We think it's very powerful. So let me jump back to my slides. So we were successful. Hooray.
Yeah.
All right. So we want to. So you saw how easy it was to update to v6, but if you have a more complex app, there are a couple more subtle changes. And so we had this in the past couple of years, but we've spent a bunch of more time updating it. It's the Angular update guide. You can find it on update.angular.io, and it will walk you through the process that I just did. You can swap out whether you want to use NPM or Yarn. If you switch your application to more basic or more advanced, it will give you more or fewer recommendations down to the like, hey, we changed this crazy API that no one ever uses, but you might have used it. And so here's how to change it. So our idea was that for most apps, basic should be enough. A few apps will need medium. And then maybe if you're a library author, you've been building Angular apps for years, you might need the advanced version. So now let's take a little bit of a look far out in the future. And so a couple things that we're working on. So at ngconf, we announced that we've got this initiative called Angular for Designers. We really do care about making the handoffs and transition between designers and developers easier. We know that a lot of designers use Angular and maybe don't want to get into all the tooling side of things, and they're used to working in things like Sketch and more static, simpler HTML. And so we're really working on how do we enable those people. And so our goal at NGConf and our continuing mission is really to start a conversation. And so if you are a designer, you work with a team of designers who have thoughts on how Angular could help designers better, please let us know, because this is something that we're continuing to invest in. And one example of this is we've actually been working with another team at Google on a cloud-based prototyping tool where you can create a hierarchy of components that actually render as real Angular components. And so the goal with this tool is both kind of rapid prototyping, but also giving designers, product managers, all these sorts of auxiliary roles access to creating these experiences which behave exactly like the real components because they're using the real components. So if you're clicking on the first name box, it's going to have the floating label just like the real material input does. Checkboxes are going to animate all these things, and there's no uncanny valley because this is all real Angular code that really works. And so we're working on this right now. We're working on ways to, for example, theoretically import third-party libraries into this tool. So definitely stay tuned if you're interested in learning more about this really exciting tool. The other project that everyone's really excited about is called Ivy. So Ivy is a new rendering pipeline that we're working on. It is not yet ready yet. So there's kind of 3 stages that we're going through. So with Ivy, we're building a new runtime, and then we started work on a new compiler. Over the next few months, these things will become ready, and then we're going to be doing a beta, an opt-in beta. It actually already exists in our CLI, and some people were a little confused by this because you can, in your TS config, you can say enable Ivy true, which works, but your application won't work because we don't even have the compiler written yet. So this is something that's going to be coming in the future as an opt-in beta. And then what will happen is because we have this experience both moving from Angular 2 to 4, where we did this once before without anyone noticing, as well as we have a fantastic test suite across more than 600 projects at Google, we feel very, very confident that we can replace the rendering pipeline behind the scenes for developers. And so we've done a bunch of demos of Ivy, and a couple of the cool things that it gives you are, for example, debuggability. And so your stack traces for template rendering will be much simpler. And you'll even be able to do things like jump directly to an error in your template, and it will jump you into the HTML. And as a side effect of this, and with the magic of the developer tools and source maps, you can even put things like a breakpoint in your HTML, which developers are really excited for. But one of the other really exciting things is that Ivy kind of inverts how we compile templates. So today we compile templates into an intermediate format that we then interpret, which means that you have the entire Angular kind of framework pulling in your template. But what we're doing instead with Ivy is we're generating instructions that instead it's your application pulling in Angular as needed. And so there's kind of an inversion of control, which means that if your code doesn't pull in a part of Angular, we'll just leave it out of your bundle through tree shaking. And so what we've seen is you only pay in terms of bundle size and code inclusion for the parts of Angular you use. And the magic here is that we have a hello world right now that is 2.7 kilobytes compressed. And so we're very, very excited to help developers reduce their bundle sizes to only what they need, or to lazy load only the parts of Angular that they need for first load, and then lazy load all the other parts. There's so many things that are possible as part of this Ivy rendering pipeline. And the magic is that all of your code is going to keep working. So we're very, very excited about that. And I wanted to thank everyone for having me, and maybe we'll open up for some questions.
So, does anyone has any question? ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? ¿Alguien quiere participar? ¿Quiere consultar algo con Stephen? Okay, looks like we have one question for you.
Hi, Stephen. Okay. Hi, Stephen.
Hi.
Okay. My name is Eduardo. First of all, thanks for sharing with us the latest information about Angular. So let me ask you about since the latest release of Angular was launched a few days ago, I mean Angular v6, How do you see the community impact over the Angular growth?
How do I see the community impact over Angular what?
Growing.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'll try and answer it, and then you can correct me. You saw the kind of usage numbers and the kind of huge growth that we're seeing, where we're nearly doubling the size of the community every year, and we're talking millions of developers. We see that frequent releases that are easy to adopt is a key piece to that growth. Last time I looked, what we saw was that most developers are actually using either the most recent version of Angular or N-1. And so we think we've been very successful with helping developers to stay up to date and stay innovative.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question you may have? No more. Okay, please come. So we have one more question for you. I hope it is okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, Steven. My name is Mauricio. And I wanted to know about the possibilities about Angular elements. What can we do? Could you give us some examples about this new feature?
Sure. So let me point you at one thing in particular. So if you, I'll screen share again. So we wrote a big long article about elements. But one of the things that's maybe easiest to understand how it works is if you take a look at this Stackblitz example. And what you'll see is that instead of using Angular to bootstrap the application at all, you're not seeing a bootstrap item here in the meta.
I'm sorry, a second.
What was that?
Can you zoom in a little bit? Yeah, looks good. Thank you.
All right. So instead of having a bootstrap method here, what we're doing is we're instead passing our app component into this new create custom element method. And then we're passing it the injector. And so this is creating a custom element called my-app. And then because we have my-app in the index.html, this isn't Angular bootstrapping this component. It's custom elements seeing my app exists and then bootstrapping it. So for example, you could have multiple of these and it should just work because the browser is the one doing the bootstrapping. And then they get all of the nice Angular context, so I can still have services, I can still have dependency injection because we're passing in the injector. And so the browser bootstraps the component, and then that pulls in the necessary pieces of Angular. And so today, this works within Angular. So obviously you need an injector, and you could package this for public distribution, but we don't have like a ng generate or ng build element yet. But that's something we want to do in the future so that you can just give someone the name of your element and a JavaScript file, and then they can include it in any application anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So one more question, perhaps? No. Okay. So no more questions, Stephen. Again, thank you very much for your time. And I really hope we can have you again as a speaker, perhaps for another event, another bigger event here in Bolivia, if possible, for sure.
Yeah,
so,
I would love to come and visit.
Great. So one more time, please.
And thank you everyone here for being an awesome part of our community. We appreciate it, and you're what makes Angular great.
Great. Nice to know that. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.